Eagle Eye in the Sky is fueled by Gatorade, the official sports drink of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Anything that move, I don't care who it is. Let's go. Give me everything you got. Play fast, play hard. Let's meet these boys tonight in their house. It's party time. It's party time. Fran, here we go. Touchdown!
You are listening to the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. Now here's your host, Fran Duffy.
That's right, another week, and we have got the division on the line in the NFC East as the Eagle Eye in the Sky, fueled by Gatorade, continues. I'm Fran Duffy, and I think we've got a great show for you here on episode number 221. At the top of this week's show, we've got Chalk Talk, where I sit down with my friend Greg Cosell to break down everything we saw with the Eagles win over Washington in Landover, Maryland this past week, and preview this weekend's matchup. This is for pretty much everything in the division in the NFC East. Week 16, Eagles, Cowboys at Lincoln Financial Field. We'll break down everything we see going into this matchup here on Sunday afternoon in Chalk Talk. After that, we'll transition into Scouting Report, where this week I'm going to go through my thoughts on Cowboys defensive end Robert Quinn and kind of turn into a bigger overall picture of pass rushers and their usage in the NFL. But let's not waste any more time. Let's get to the top of the show. It's time to talk Eagles, Washington, and Eagles Cowboys here. It's time for Chalk Talk.
Let's get down to business. It's time for Chalk Talk.
Happy to welcome back for another week of Chalk Talk on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. Our friend Greg Cosell. Greg, it's week 16.
It is.
Week 16.
And it's December, Fran, and it's cold outside.
Starting to feel it a little bit in your
I'm starting
bones?
to feel it a little bit.
Yeah.
My old bones are creaking, Fran.
I mean, I didn't call them old bones. I was
I did.
I was going to let
did.
you call them.
Believe me, it's okay.
Oh,
They're creaking.
Yeah, well, it's that time of year. But look, big matchup this week here at Lincoln Financial Field. Eagles Cowboys.
You think so?
Yeah, it's a big one.
I might watch a little of it.
To quote a friend of the podcast, Bo Wolf, they're almost not all the marbles, but almost all the marbles, because week 17 will matter now that the Cowboys beat the LA Rams. But before we get into this week, let's talk about.
Well, it won't matter for the Eagles if they lose.
Well, it won't matter if they lose. That's correct. But if they win,
if they win, it will matter.
17.
Correct.
So let's talk through this past week, though. Week 15 down in Washington. Big win for the Eagles, and it was not a pretty win. It was a little bit of an ugly win in terms of there's no such thing as an ugly win, but it was a very tight win. It was not a 10-point victory in the scope that you would imagine. But look, back and forth affair. Eagles offense goes down, they score. Washington comes back down, they score, and they go back and forth throughout the course of the game. What were your thoughts overall walking away from the tape?
I tell you, my thoughts are a little concerning, to be honest with you.
Okay.
And I think they're more concerning. We spent a lot of time talking about the Eagle offense over the last month or so.
Yeah.
Simply because there's a lack of weapons, and I don't think we're saying anything crazy when we say that.
Yeah, all the injuries, no question.
Right. But over the last 3 weeks, this defense has struggled. And they've struggled against offenses that you would not expect them to struggle against.
Yeah.
First, Fitzpatrick in Miami, then a bit against the Giants, and certainly against a rookie quarterback in Dwayne Haskins, who clearly, and I think you would agree, played his best game as a starter against the Eagles.
Yeah,
he looked like a professional quarterback.
Yeah.
Whereas he had struggled to really look like one up until this point. So, yes, it's a win, and that's all you want at this time of year. I mean, that sets up this week's game, as you said. But I think that's a little bit concerning, particularly now, and we'll get to this, obviously, going up against a team that has arguably the second or third best group of skill position weapons in the NFL.
Yeah, I think when you look at that Eagles defense over the month of November, what they were able to do, we talked about it. We saw the secondary got healthy. They played a lot of third down. It was press man coverage and 5-man pressures, and they were getting after it. And
where has that been?
Well, I think what we've seen is that they were starting to get beat a little bit deep.
Right.
And they started to back off a little bit.
I think the Miami game scared them a little bit?
Yeah, they're a little bit less press man now, because now they've got to give those guys help over the top, and so that pulls away from the effectiveness of being in 5-man pressures and being aggressive up front. And so, I think there's definitely trade-offs there.
And I think, too, if you do feel that way, as Coach Schwartz obviously does, then you back off your pressures a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where they're at. And
Right.
I think also injuries have certainly not helped. Losing Derek Barnett, I think it has been pretty big. And Vinny Curry had a good week a couple weeks ago against New York. And Sweat has continued to mount games where you see a few good rushes here and there. But that pass rush, you'd still like to be able to get a better, be a little bit more effective. I think Washington, look, they did a good job of getting the ball out of Dwayne Haskins' hands, but there were certain points, especially late in that game on Sunday, where you'd like that rush to be able to get home a little bit faster than it was.
Oh, I would agree. I remember one play, and I think it might have been the first play of a fourth quarter drive where he stuck the dig ball to McLaren of play action.
Yep.
Now, granted, it was play action, but it was, I think, a dagger concept. And they actually had a nice concept. If I recall, they had the wheel right behind it. It was
It was very nice.
a really nice
That's what we talked about as we were watching it.
Right, it was a really nice concept, but they stuck the dig in the zone void. I believe it was cover 3. But
it was 6-0 line on the field.
It was 6-0 line, that is correct.
So you had Tony Bergstrom one-on-one with Josh Sweat, and we were sitting there watching. We're like, man, Sweat had put together a couple of nice rushes at that point. And I'd say, man, this would be the one that you'd like to get. But like you said, it was play action. And so you could tell he's starting to set the edge in the run game. And then by the time he realized it was pass, he was trying to convert into a pass.
And it held the linebackers, too, to create the zone void.
Yep.
But the larger point, I think, and you made it and you're correct, is at his core, I think Coach Schwartz would ultimately like to rush 4 and play coverage. Now, when I say coverage, that doesn't always mean zone, but play coverage.
Yep.
And have more bodies, have 7 in coverage, because it's a numbers game. All football comes down to, in most cases, is a numbers game.
Yeah.
You'd like to be able to rush with 4, then you have 7 in coverage to defend at most 5 eligibles.
Yep.
So you theoretically have an advantage numbers-wise. You don't theoretically, you do. But if you can't get there with 4, then that presents some issues. Then what do you do?
Yeah.
Then you start thinking, okay, I'm going to have to get there. Because as I recall, in this game, they did not come with a 0 blitz until the fourth quarter.
I
Was
believe
it the
that's
fourth
correct.
quarter?
Yeah, I believe that was correct.
Yeah.
They had a couple of blitzes early that, one where they were able to get the ball out quick and Haskins burned them. Another one, Nate Gary had gotten home for a sack, but it came back off a defensive penalty. So they really weren't able to kind of get things going with a 4-man rush or with the blitz.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a high-volume blitz game for sure.
No, and Jim Schwartz is certainly a lot smarter than I am, but I thought going into this game, given what we had seen of Dwayne Haskins through his can't remember
handful
the number of starts, the handful of starts, I thought we'd see a lot more pressure. And again, not 50% pressure on his dropbacks, but I thought we'd see a little more pressure. And you really saw kind of a conventional game. 4-man rush, a lot of zone, some man mixed in, but not high percentage man.
Yep.
It was a pretty conventional game.
Yeah, third downs, they typically, not every third down, but you typically saw a safety moved over to McLaurin's side.
Right.
So they tried to do a little bit of that to try and prevent anything deep. His play came off a play where
the 75-yarder?
75-yarder.
Well, that was where the jet motion caught them.
Yeah, they rocked and rolled the safety.
Yeah.
And that's tough.
Well, Maddox was the one who retreated as the deep post safety, and he got caught.
Yeah.
He was a beat late getting back, and then he got stuck.
What I mean by when I say rock and roll the safeties, I said that as if I
understood what you meant.
What I meant. Basically, when when a receiver goes in jet motion, teams play it one of two ways. Either the defender that's with him runs
across with him,
or they exchange responsibilities with another player. And typically, what you'll see is the safety come from the deep part of the field. He will now run to the player going with the jet, and the guy that had the receiver will now replace him as the
deep post safety.
And that's what some people will say, rock and roll the safeties. And the Eagles did that on that play. Maddox goes to the post, except they threw the slant behind him where he just came from. So he had to flip his hips around, come to balance, come downhill, and try and make a stop. And
because Mills was playing in off coverage, McLaurin caught it on the move, and it was a tough deal.
Yeah, and so he missed tackle. First play of the series goes 75 yards the other way.
First play of the second series, I believe.
Yeah. And that was tough too because the Eagles had just, I think it was like a 13-play drive.
Well, they ran 25 plays on their first 2 possessions.
Right.
One ended, I think, 16 plays on the first series that ended with a field goal, or 15, and then 10 on the second with a touchdown.
Yep.
So they ran 25 plays on their first 2 possessions.
Yeah, and it was just tough because the Eagles had to go that long for that first drive. They get 3. and then Washington comes out and they go one play, 75 yards, and it's like, all right, now we got to go again. All right, let's come out and do this all over again. And that's tough, but that's kind of where they're at.
That is where they're at.
Yeah, that is where they're at. But no, defensively, we saw Ronald Darby go in and out a little bit of the game with
Was
an
he
injury.
hurt?
Yeah, it seemed like I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, because Douglas, I think he played about 15, 16 snaps.
Something like that, yep. And then I thought there was more of a rotation at linebacker. We saw a little bit more T.J. Edwards.
Well, you saw it because of the personnel.
Yeah.
It was because of the Redskins' personnel.
They played a lot of heavy with
Bergstrom. At times they went heavy with Bergstrom and a fullback.
Yep.
So depending on, and I jotted it down, I typed it out, but the specifics aren't important. The point is, versus whatever form of heavy the Redskins were in, the Eagles either went with 5 down linemen or with 4-4.
Yeah.
4 down linemen or 4 linebackers, bringing in Edwards, Duke Riley. So that's how they kind of matched up.
Tackling was not great in this game either, and that's something that will have to get fixed for this week.
Without question.
I mean, that's got to get better.
Especially if you turn on the tape of Ezekiel Elliott this week, his contact balance.
Tony Pollard as well. Tony Pollard broke like 8 tackles in this game.
I know, but think of it this way, and we'll talk in more detail,
Yeah.
but through 3 quarters of the Cowboys game,
Yep.
Zeke had 22 of his 24 rushes, and Pollard only carried the ball 5 times.
Right.
Pollard carried the ball in the 4th quarter.
Yeah.
Now, Pollard is an explosive player, and we could see him play far more snaps this week, so I'm not suggesting he's not important.
Right.
But their offense this past week ran through Zeke.
Yeah, I'm just saying that they've got to be able to tackle. Like
whoever has the ball would be a good idea to tackle him.
Yes. Because Pollard, I was watching all their big runs. And his 2 biggest runs of the day. He broke like 5 tackles.
Oh, I know.
2 runs. But yeah, just going. But they've got to be able to tackle better. The coverage, obviously, has got to be able to hold up because we talked last week. It was Terry McLaurin. The week before, Darius Slayton. The week before that, Devontae Parker. This game, you've got Amari Cooper, who I know has been banged up and has been dealing with some injuries.
Michael Gallup.
And you've got Michael Gallup.
And Cobb's pretty good in the slot.
Yeah, it's a good group of receivers.
And I would not fall asleep on Blake Jarwin. He's a pretty athletic guy.
Yep, so the tackling certainly defensively has got to be a little bit better than what we've seen over the last couple of weeks. They did pretty good against Saquon Barkley a couple of weeks ago against New York. They're going to need a kind of a repeat effort in this game here against Dallas. But anything else defensively before we flip sides over to the other side?
I'm trying to think if there's... No, I don't think
I thought Rodney McLeod had a good game in this game. He had a couple really good sticks coming downhill, some really good one-on-one stops.
I can remember one where he actually blew his man coverage when he saw Haskins run.
Right.
And he went and tackled Haskins.
Yeah, but he also got I want to say it was a back in the back, coming out of the backfield.
Right.
I forget who exactly it was. He had a couple really good sticks in the game overall. He stood out. But
Interesting concept, though, just as a final point.
Yeah, what do you got?
As to when they go 4 corner dime versus 3 safety dime versus when LeBlanc's in the game. LeBlanc they view obviously as kind of a stronger run player than
just based off
Maddox.
Usage. Yep, right.
Because they play, when they want to go nickel versus 12 personnel, LeBlanc's in the game.
Right.
And Maddox is out.
And Dallas will play a decent amount of 12.
They'll play a good amount of 12.
With Witten and Jarwin, you'll see.
Yeah.
That. All right, let's go over to the other side offensively. And a couple players to talk about here. Obviously, look, they go on their second straight game where they go with a 4th quarter or an overtime winning drive, late to win it. Miles Sanders has the record-breaking day.
Yep.
He breaks the record for most scrimmage yards by an Eagles rookie. That was a previous record by Deshaun Jackson. The most rushing yards by an Eagles rookie, set by LaShawn McCoy over their first season. It was a huge day for Sanders. And a lot of that yardage was on a couple of draw plays on 3rd and long. Where
I know, those are interesting calls. Delayed draws on 3rd and long, 3rd and 7 and 3rd and 12, I believe.
I believe so, yeah. And that's a tendency breaker because Doug Peterson typically does not run the ball in those situations.
Well, on 3rd and 12, that was a very interesting play. That was the long run.
That was the 56-yard.
And he was actually offset to the boundary, and they overload blitzed from that side of the field.
Right.
And then they slanted the D-line from the other side.
Yeah,
so
they did.
It was kind of watching the play on again, when you're watching it live, you don't see it all.
Right.
But watching it on tape, and I knew obviously the result of the play, but I'm thinking, man, he could have easily been tackled right there.
Well, that's the thing is like even in the first one, when you've got slants and twists in front, those usually kill draws. And I thought that the Eagles' offensive line, Isaac Seumalo in particular, did an outstanding job on the first one of sorting through all of that and making sure that he was not struck in the backfield.
That was like the 14-yard run.
That was the 14-yarder. And then they came back later. They slanted inside. There was nobody replacing in the C-gap.
And because it was a zone pressure, they zone matched the receivers to trips to the side that he ultimately ran,
right?
Because it wasn't man coverage.
It was essentially man-to-man.
It became man-to-man, and they just turned their back. Yep. And once he was able to clear the overload blitz, there was no one there.
Essentially, on these plays, it's Miles Sanders being faster than the guys that are in the box that are pursuing him from the backside. Because he had two defenders coming out from the boundary side where they overloaded.
Landon Collins was trying to chase him. Couldn't get him.
Yep, couldn't get him. And on the first one, Collins was coming from distance and couldn't get him.
Right.
So on both those plays, Sanders was able to create big plays. I said this on game day as well, that for a guy that a lot of people have questioned, he's pitter-pattering his feet and he wants to bounce outside. He's not finding those tight creases. Those draw plays are really good for those guys because you're creating very wide running lanes and getting them in space very quickly.
Well, I think he's done better with that too.
He has, no question.
Again, it's easy with a clicker to see.
Right.
I love when people say, well, he missed the hole. Maybe he did at times.
Yes.
That's hard to know.
You know who also misses a lot of holes? Adrian Peterson has always missed a lot of holes. And
so
been pretty
there was
productive.
one run where I thought that he could have hit it a little more, but that's a little hard to really know for sure. Because the one thing you don't know is how that stuff's taught. Because I remember speaking to Mike Shanahan, and I'm sure Kyle Shanahan's the same way. They're very precise in how they teach it. Other coaches are not. Other coaches, and there's no right or wrong here, other coaches take the point of view that, hey, we coach the first two steps and then God takes over. Now, that's easy to say, and maybe that's, who knows? There's no right or wrong, but we don't, I don't know how it's coached.
Yep.
Maybe you do. I don't know how they coach it.
I think it's important too that on specific plays and specific situations, it's tough for us on the outside to always say, he could have just run out here. Look at this wide all the space. The overtime run last week, the belly play down in the high red zone that got them inside the 5.
Right.
A lot of people on Twitter when I had posted the shot said, if he had just kept running outside, he could have scored. Well, if he kept running outside, Greg Ward is blocking inside out.
Right.
He's going to draw a holding penalty if he does that, and he's probably getting chewed out, even if the penalty is not thrown.
Right.
Deuce Staley's going to chew him out when he goes to this because he could have drawn a penalty.
Right.
You have to play off your blocks.
Right. Well, it's like when they show on TV, the TV version of receiver open, and the announcer says, "Well, he's wide open."
Right.
That means nothing.
There are plenty of Twitter analysts that will do a lot of the same thing. Some in our local market that will do all the same thing. But all right, let's talk about Carson Wentz in this game. 30 of 43, first quarterback in Eagles history, or third quarterback in Eagles history. Sorry about that. That posted 30 completions, 3 touchdowns, no picks. Last guy to do that, Donovan McNabb, Super Bowl year in 2004 against Green Bay. Remember that primetime game where they just torched them? It was 35 points in the first half.
Yeah, I do remember that game.
That was the last time an Eagles quarterback did that. Look, had a couple misses in this game, but I think overall,
and he may be that. He may be that guy.
Yeah.
He may be the guy that misses a few every week and then makes the special play. Because obviously the touchdown to Sanders, there's not a lot of guys on this planet who are going to make that throw.
No.
So that's one of those plays. Overall, I think it was obviously there was a lot more positive than negative. And I think you just accept the fact that there'll be a few that he misses.
Yeah, I think that the discussion, it's in my mind's eye, and I know that this has changed with you as well when talking about the quarterback position and these second reaction plays and playing outside of structure. I think with young quarterbacks in today's game, it's almost, I don't want to say it's a necessity, but you almost kind of need it because of, and we're going way down the road here.
Right.
But I think with offensive line play kind of deteriorating a little bit across the scope of the league, I think that quarterbacks have to be able to get themselves out of trouble. So if the scheme isn't going to be one, you think of like Sean McVay, Jared Goff, the scheme's going to set him up for success, more often than not early in his career. If the scheme's not going to get you out of trouble and you're not going to be at the point where you're Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Phillip Rivers, Eli Manning to get yourself out of trouble pre-snap and see things and say, okay, we've got to check out of this and we've got to check out of that and get to this play, then you need to be able to escape with your feet and make those kinds of plays. But with that, you're going to get some negative plays as well. And
right.
We've seen
and that's a fascinating discussion, which I hope to have with some coaches at the Combine.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we're getting into a situation, a number of things here. First of all, offensive linemen in college, many of them, because of college football, play in systems where the ball comes out pretty quick.
Yep.
Number two, the athletes on defense are just better athletes than offensive linemen.
Yeah.
That's the way it is. there's a lot of coaches who believe that the biggest mismatch on the field remains offensive linemen versus pass rushers, because now we're not just dealing with 4 down lineman pass rushers.
Yep.
We're dealing with a lot of other pass rushers. We're dealing, the good teams, you look at a team like the Ravens, a very good team. They've got a lot of pass rushers who are 250-pound athletes. And a lot of teams are moving in that direction.
Right.
And it becomes difficult. So now when you get into longer yardage situations and teams can create pressure schemes, you make a good point. Is the quarterback who basically can only play within the rhythm of the offense, is that not enough anymore?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know.
And I don't know the answer to that.
Unless to me,
unless you're truly special,
or if the scheme is such that you're, again, if you're in that situation, like you've got a dominant run game, and the coach puts you in a position where you're able, hey, it's going to be a ton of play action.
There's
a lot of
always going to be
game,
games and snaps where that's not the case.
That's not the case.
Look what happened to the Rams against the Cowboys.
The Super Bowl, or the Super Bowl last year, like with
Correct.
Jared Goff. Yeah.
Look, for the previous 2 weeks prior to the loss to the Cowboys on Sunday, the Rams' offense against the Cards and the Seahawks was incredibly rhythmic, timing-based. Goff looked tremendous.
Yep.
You and I haven't really talked about that because they weren't playing the Rams.
Right.
Eagles weren't playing the Rams. But they looked really good with their play-action game. Goff was rhythmic. And then all of a sudden, in the game against the Cowboys, his O-line gets a little manhandled. The Cowboys' D-line dominated. And he couldn't quite be as rhythmic as he needs to be effective.
Right.
And he really doesn't have anywhere to go if he's not being rhythmic.
Yep. Yeah, I think that the discussion is probably a bigger one that we can have early in the offseason.
We'll have in the offseason as we start evaluating quarterbacks and just talking about college players.
But I think when talking about, and Carson Wentz, because a lot was talked about as well after the game about the fumble. And I think with Carson and the fumbling.
But at the end of the day, you can't do that.
That's the thing, is ball security is paramount.
Right.
You've got to protect the football. And all of these fumbles are all for different reasons. Some of them you could say, he's got to have 2 hands on the ball.
He has to.
Some of them you could say, he takes a hit from the blind side, like that, that can't happen. They're busted protections, and a lot of quarterbacks are fumbling in those scenarios. So all of them, I think you kind of have to parse those out. At the end of the day, they've got to protect the football, but also for those that, a lot of people will say, oh, well, he's just got to get rid of the ball. He's got to get rid of the ball. He holds on to the ball too long. That Miles Sanders play doesn't happen.
Well, you got to know what the play is to know that's one of those pointless comments.
Yeah, but my point is that the Miles Sanders play, some of these other great plays we've seen from him throughout the course of his career, and others as well. I mean, we know like Deshaun Watson holds on to the ball a whole lot of the time. Russell Wilson holds on to the ball a lot.
Right.
Those plays don't happen. There's going to be some positives. There's going to be some negatives.
You have to get rid of the negatives. When I say negatives, turnovers. Obviously, if there's nothing wrong with throwing an incompletion, there's nothing wrong with running for 2 yards and then you punt.
And there are some good sacks to take.
Right, but you can't. The one in particular where it got smacked out of his hand. He was still generally in the pocket area. You have to have 2 hands on the ball. That's a coachable thing. Right. That can be fixed.
Yes, those are the ones that you got to work through.
Right.
No, I thought that was a kind of a discussion that we could have. Screen game. Huge for the
Their screen game was very multiple and very good.
Yeah, they've and I think
it has
the last
to be
couple
good
of weeks
because they don't have any vertical dimension to their offense, so the screen game has to be good.
I thought this game they at least tried to do a couple things from a shot standpoint. It seemed like they called a couple of plays with Robert Davis streaking down the field. I know on Zach on the very first play of the game. They ran one to Ertz on a deep over route, but they ran a couple. But they're not attacking the vertical part of the field.
There was one where Davis was open and Wentz was under pressure. You could tell he just didn't feel comfortable turning it loose.
Right.
You know the play I'm talking about.
I
can't remember exactly when it was.
Deep post. He's coming from the left side.
Correct.
Yeah, he had one.
And the safety was sort of on the post safety was on the other hash basically, and it was there, but you could tell that he just didn't feel comfortable. And by the way, and this is something they're going to have to clean up too. I thought there were too many plays in which one-on-one matchups did not go as well as they need to go for the Eagles' O-line. Because even on some completions, his O-line was pushed back into him.
Yep. No, there were a lot of plays where Carson had to kind of sidestep pressure, make sure he found a throwing lane. There was a guy right in his lap, and he did a good job of that.
No, he did.
Under pressure. I know Ron Jaworski posted a really good stat on Twitter about his numbers under pressure versus.
Yes, I saw
it. His numbers versus the blitz. I went and charted that for
Jaworski.
For
who was that? I never heard of him.
Oh yeah, you like every single day with the guy for 25 years,
almost 30.
Carson 10 of 13 14, 116 yards against the blitz in this game. So
And also his second half and fourth quarter numbers were
they were outstanding. Ben Fennell pulled those numbers. I know
they're ridiculous. I think in the fourth quarter he didn't throw an incompletion. If I'm not mistaken.
I want to make sure I have the correct number.
I thought he was 11 for 11 in the fourth quarter, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, and he was perfect on the final drive for sure. I think when you look at the way that he was able to play, he was so efficient late in this game, just making sure that he was putting the ball where it needed to be. Overall, I thought it was one.
The other thing that I thought was really good on the final drive, the patience. There was never a sense that they were hurrying and felt that they had to get it done now.
Right. Yep. No question. Final drive. This is from Ben Fennell on Twitter. At Ben Fennell _NFL. Final drive, he's 8 for 8, 68 yards and a touchdown. Fourth quarter overall, 11 for 11, 89 yards, 2 touchdowns. Second half, 18 of 21, 141 yards, 3 touchdowns.
And you can quibble about the yardage, but as we say, they don't have true intermediate and vertical weapons. So that's just the way it goes. You still need to complete passes.
Yep, and he was able to do that at a pretty high level in this game. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else we need to cover.
We can start talking about the game coming up. It's a pretty big one.
It's kind of a big matchup. Let's stay on this side of the ball. So Eagles offense against this Dallas defense. Overall, I think when you look at this group, it's a defensive line that runs too deep up front. They run guys in and out.
That's the strength of their team, of their defense.
Yeah.
That's what they want their defense to be, to start there, and if they play really well as they did against the Rams, they can control the game.
Yeah, and again, they kind of rotate guys in and out pretty regularly, and you've got DeMarcus Lawrence, who's a blue-chip player at left end. Robert Quinn, a very disruptive player at right defensive end. Antoine Woods, I thought, had a really good game against the Rams yesterday. So you look at him inside at nose tackle, Malik Collins as well. Oh, and then they go hockey line change, and it's okay. Michael Bennett comes on the field. They've got Kerry Hyder, who comes onto the field. Take me through some of these other names that I'm missing here. There's another big one.
I know. I'm trying.
Crawford's hurt. He's on IR, but they've got a handful of guys that come in and give them quality snaps, both inside and off the edge. Guys that can be very, very disruptive.
Oh, the Kansas kid.
Oh, thank you, Dorrance Armstrong.
He's a good player too.
Yeah.
Athletic kid.
Yeah. Yeah, athletic kid.
Yeah.
So certainly that seems to be the strength of their team. A lot of different stunts. We'll get a little bit into their blitz package as well. Not a high volume blitz team, but they mix things up and they have some good pressures built in.
And I also think that they're very deceptive with their pressures. They do a good job of disguising it, and you don't necessarily know it's coming.
Yeah, Jaylon Smith previously had been a very big part of their blitz package.
Not as much recently.
Not as much recently.
No. I wonder if they're doing that because of the injuries at linebacker. Maybe they feel that with Leighton Vander Esch out and Sean Lee playing, that the talents of Vander Esch and Lee are different, and that they want Smith to play more conventional linebacker.
I think so, and even if
Vander Esch, I don't believe will be going this week either.
Doesn't seem that way. And when both guys are on the field, it seems like they'll use Lee even more as a blitzer, and I think that's mainly because they don't want Lee playing too much.
Because while Lee's a very good player, Vander Esch and Lee, to me, have different talents.
Right. I'll tell you what, the interception Sean Lee made.
That was pretty good play.
Big play. It was basically they were running a cover 2 beater to his side. The Cowboys were in cover 2. He read the play perfectly. They were trying to suck him up with the little hitch route.
Yep.
And they had the in breaker behind him. He felt it and was able to make a nice play.
Because when Goff threw the ball, he did not expect Lee to be in that spot to make a play.
This was a big play. It was a 1-score game at the time.
Yes.
And this was really what kind of got the route going.
Yes.
Because that put them inside the 10-yard line. They took a 2-score lead.
And I think that Jordan Lewis is a pretty good slot defender, by the way.
They use him a lot. You'll be talking about him a little bit in their blitz package.
Yeah, they use him as a blitzer.
Yeah, big sack against the Eagles.
He sure did.
Yep.
Obviously he's there because Brown, I believe, he's out for the year, right? Brown?
Yeah, I believe so. Anthony Brown. Yep.
So Lewis has been their slot for a good month now.
Yep.
I think he's a pretty good player.
Yeah, I think when you look at that cornerback group as a whole, they've done a good job of just acquiring talent. Byron Jones, former first-round pick at right corner. Chidobe Awuzie, a second-round pick, starter at left corner. Jordan Lewis in the slot. Xavier Lewis is the safety. He's a nice player. Xavier Woods, sorry.
Who we both like coming out.
Both like coming out of Louisiana Tech.
Yes, and he's become a real quality. I mean, essentially what they do, in their base front, they're an over front defense, which means that the 3 technique is to the tight end side.
Right.
And the strong safety then is a box player, and that's Jeff Heath. And Woods is the deep player. The only time Woods... Not the only time, but when Woods is the box player and Heath is the deep player is when they'll go to an under front. That's generally how they do it because they're an over front defense at their foundation.
Yep, which typically puts the 3 technique over to
the strong
side,
to the tight end side.
It's coverage-wise. Chris Richard comes from that cover 3 school. Rod Marinelli comes from cover 2 school with Lovie Smith and Tony Dungy.
It's more Chris Richard now.
More Chris Richard, and it seemed like a good amount of man coverage as well. A good amount of single high safety man coverage.
And they also play 2 man and 1 robber.
Yep.
I mean, there's a lot of man-based coverages in what they do, which doesn't mean you won't see cover 2.
Which we saw them play it against the Rams.
Well, again, they got ahead and the game got different.
Yep.
But you still will see it on occasion, but I think they're more post-safety, man-based, and I think Chris Richard has probably a little more influence at this point.
Yeah, no, I think that's kind of the identity of that group. And middle of the road in terms of allowing big plays. They'll give up some big plays defensively. Third down, they get off the field at a very high rate. They're just not taking the ball away. That's really the big bugaboo for them is only 6 picks on the year, 15 takeaways overall. That's tied for 27th in the league. So they're just not taking the ball away at the rate that they would like. But overall, this is a talented defense. They've got blue chip players at all 3 levels. They fly around. They're multiple. It's a good group.
It all starts up front.
Yeah.
If the Eagles can't control that front, they're going to have a hard time.
We remember back week 7, the Eagles gave them 14 points right off the jump.
Well, that can't happen.
You had the fumble from Carson early on, the interception early on. So you can't give them two touchdowns to start this game.
No, you cannot.
That's not something
because the Eagles in that game wanted to come out and run the ball. As you recall, Jordan Howard was playing, and I don't know what his status will be for this week. Hey, even if he's healthy, the way Miles Sanders is playing, and the fact that Sanders and Scott play together now in meaningful snaps, because at least there's a little juice there with both of them. Who knows? I'm not knocking Jordan Howard.
Of course.
But the point is, in that Week 7 matchup, the Eagles wanted to come out and run the ball, and then all of a sudden it's 14-0. And you can say what you want, abstractly and on the blackboard, but when it's 14-0.
I think it's a whiteboard at these points.
Is it a whiteboard?
Yeah, I don't think.
Or it's a Microsoft tablet.
Well, it's definitely that.
Yes.
But the blackboards, I think, are.
But I'm old, Fran. So, but anyway, the point being that, when it gets to be 14-0, even though you might say in your mind, oh, we have a lot of time, it just changes the worldview.
Yeah, no question. It's the other injury is with Lane Johnson, not knowing where he's at. I mean, that's a
high ankle sprain. They'll try to get him ready, but high ankle sprains. They take time.
Yeah, tomorrow hit the.
He won't be at 100% even if he's out there playing.
No doubt. I think when you look at the matchup with him and DeMarcus Lawrence, he had pitched a shutout against Lawrence up until this past game, and then he had that sack fumble.
And actually, Lane did not have a great game in the first matchup.
Yeah, I'm sure that's one he would like to have back.
No question, and one reason why he'd like to be on the field this week. But again, who knows?
Absolutely. Let's go over to the other side now. So this Eagles defense going up against Dallas's offense. We've talked about some of the struggles that they've had. We said that they need to tackle better. They have not beaten this Cowboys team when Ezekiel Elliott is in the lineup. And I think when you look back at that last game, they ran for 189 overall in the game.
Right.
I'm pretty sure if I remember right, they averaged 6.8 yards per carry on first down. So that they've got to be able to stop the run and stop the run early on in this game.
And I think the Cowboys kind of reassessed after their 2 Thursday losses to Buffalo on Thanksgiving and then to Chicago, and then they had a little extra time to prepare for the Rams. And I think they said, you know what? We're going to need to hand the ball to Zeke. Because Zeke, through 3 quarters against the Rams, had 22 carries on 56 of their offensive plays through 3 quarters.
Pretty high ratio.
There's about 40% of their offensive plays through 3 quarters. Elliott carried the ball, and he looked really good this past week.
I mean, you paid him that money to win this time of year, like December, January. Like this is where he earns his money. That's what they're leaning on.
And while Dak has put up big numbers, and there's no question he's a good quarterback, there's something about Zeke and the identity and foundation of this team that's really where it starts.
Yeah, I think when you look at this team, you've got to be able to stop the run, especially with what they've been able to do with Ezekiel Elliott. They ran for 260 yesterday overall as a team. You mentioned the efficiency with which he was able to operate, just alone as a back. Very multiple run game, zone run game for sure, but a lot of gap schemes, misdirection. They did a great job with their misdirection schemes against the Eagles in Week 7.
Well, and they run too with Elliott as an I back, both in 1-back sets and 2-back sets with Alawali. They run out of the shotgun. They run out of the pistol. It's a very multiple run game, and it's a tough run game to defend. Obviously, Pollard had some big runs, and you got to be careful with him. He's got a lot of juice, but he had 5 carries through 3 quarters, and then he had the big runs in the fourth quarter when the game was out of hand, but he still does get snaps.
Yep. And then what they do is they run so well in early downs. They get to third down, and it's very manageable. They're the number one third down team in football, 48.6% conversion. Third and long, they're 37.5% conversion, which also kind of speaks to their efficiency. Schematically, we talked last time these two teams played, bunches, rubs, a lot of misdirection. They do a great job with motions and shifts.
Yes.
They do a lot of things to set Dak Prescott up for success on third down.
And the receivers are really good individually.
Yeah. I mean, Michael Gallup's turning into a much better player than I thought he'd be coming out of Colorado State.
Yeah, I liked him, as you recall.
Yeah, you liked him more than I did.
And they have three really good wideouts when they go to three wide receiver personnel.
Randall Cobb, yep.
And I know Jason Witten obviously still plays, but I think Blake Jarwin gives them an athleticism that Witten obviously does not have at this point. So they are a very talented offensive group.
Big plays all over the place. They're third in the NFL, 61 completions of over 20 yards, 12 touchdowns of over 20 yards. That's third in the NFL as well. So this is a team that wants to be able to create big plays, run game. I mean, that's the Eagles. That's a big test.
There's a tough assignment.
The defense needs to play to the level they were playing a month ago, not to what we've seen over the last 3 weeks.
You can't get down big in this game early. And when I say big, I mean 14-0, 17-3. I think that would be a tough go against this defense.
Yeah, and this offense, because that when they get into that mode, it's Zeke and another dose of Zeke.
And I don't know if there's a better back in the league with contact balance and finishing power that makes a 3-yard run become a 7-yard run.
Yeah. And the other part of that, too, is that we didn't mention is the quarterback run game. When they get into those crucial spots, third and short, red zone, Dak Prescott in those situations is going to leverage it.
It's odd that they're 7-7 because their talent's really good. And again, they're 7-7 for a reason.
They were ready to burn it down like 2 weeks ago. And I was looking at their roster today, just kind of getting things ready for the podcast and for the show. And I'm looking, like injuries and stuff.
They have a very good roster.
They don't have a lot of guys hurt.
No.
So I'm looking and I'm like, man, I could see why there was frustration with media and fans down there because, they've got the same record as the Eagles, and you look at the Eagles injured reserve list and you're like, oh, well, that makes sense. And then you look at theirs and you're like, okay, well, crickets. There's, Tyrone Crawford is on injured reserve and he's a nice player, and they put their starting left guard on IR, but and
Van Der Esch, but Lee's a quality player.
Yeah, I mean, they've got Sean Lee coming off the back. Okay. So I could see why there's been frustration, but it's going to be a big matchup, a huge test for this Eagles team at this stretch of the year. But it's
that's what you want to be doing, playing big games at this time of year.
No question. Well, Greg, we'll be back here next week at this desk to break down what we see in this game. Hopefully, we're talking about an Eagles team that is in control of the NFC East, but we'll be here to break it down.
And if the Eagles win, they still have to win the next
17.
week.
Yeah, I mean.
Well, unless the Cowboys were to lose week 17, but you don't,
Exactly. So we'll be breaking that down hopefully next week here on Chalk Talk on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. Great stuff from Greg, and you could follow him on Twitter just like I do, at Greg Cosell. And while you're at it, I'm at FDuffy3. That's where I post all the podcasts I'm a part of and all of our X's and O's content that we produce here at PhiladelphiaEagles.com. And you know how much I appreciate everybody that promotes all of that content on all forms of social media. That's one way to support this show, but the best way, I say it every week, go on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever you listen, leave us a rating, leave us a comment. If you leave us a question, we'll answer it here on the show. We've got a couple comments from our Apple Podcast page. Daniel YGU left a 5-star review a couple weeks ago, said, best podcast out there for Eagles Nation. Actually watches our All 22 review over on our Eagles YouTube page. So thank you for watching, and shout out to all of you guys watching on our YouTube page right now on this podcast. And then next one from Right Him, left a 5-star review. Love the pod each week, and left a question, so I wanted to answer it here. And Right Him asks, I wanted to ask, would Carson Wentz benefit more from having a Julio Jones or Odell Beckham type of talent at wide receiver? I ask this understanding, of course, that every quarterback would benefit from having a reliable wide receiver like that, but I ask it in the sense of because of Carson's tendency to push the ball downfield to make a play in critical high-pressure moments rather than to just get the ball to an open receiver. So having a star player at wide receiver would alleviate him zeroing in on a guy like Zach Ertz or trying to force a play to a receiver that may not end as well as possibly going to a check-down option, which could have gone better. So good question, Wilt, and I think really when you look at Carson and really quarterback play in general, all quarterbacks benefit from space. right? And there's lots of different, when I mean space, I mean receivers that are in space. And there are a lot of ways to get that done. You can do that with talent, guys that have speed and have quickness and that are technicians, have the ability to create their own separation, right? Whether they're technicians at the receiver spot or whether they can just run by people or run around people, you have those guys that can win one-on-one. You can also have guys that are able to be created, have separation created due to scheme, so you look at guys like Jared Goff playing in the Rams or, Kirk Cousins playing in Minnesota. Yeah, they've got two great receivers there, but, with that scheme, a lot of play action, things like that, things are very well defined and they're able to get some guys open off of those play fakes. So, yeah, there's lots of different ways you can do it. I think also young quarterbacks have the benefit. You look at guys like Carson Wentz and Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, go down the list. A lot of those guys, when they have that athletic ability, the ability to break the pocket, make plays outside of structure, defenses have to respect that, and you'll often get defenses that pull players out of position, not by design, but just by nature. When guys break the pocket, other players will flow towards the quarterback and leave others open. So you get into scramble drill situations. It's tough to be able to plaster up on all 5 eligible receivers through 5, 6, 7 seconds and be able to cover. So those things help create things for the quarterback. So I think Carson Wentz is like a lot of quarterbacks where you'd like there to be a lot of space for those receivers, right? You'd like those guys to be able to separate or get separation and find different ways to get them into the open field. I think when you look at guys like Patrick Mahomes and, this year, there are certainly guys like Lamar Jackson. There are going to be some plays, a handful of plays every game. We see it from Carson Wentz, right? Where he's going to put the team on his back. He's going to run around. That throw to Miles Sanders this week, it's a superhuman play, right? We see those each and every week from those star quarterbacks. After that, now it's what can the offense do for you? What can your playmakers do for you? Sometimes you're going to see guys go up and make big plays. You're going to see, screen game, play action, some of those gimme plays that, just kind of rack up completions. And we've seen that from this Eagles offense, especially over the last couple of weeks where, Carson Wentz had 30 completions on Sunday afternoon. He had 7 in the screen game. You saw some off play action. You were able to see some of those things start to work for him. And that's, those are the things that help boost up numbers. So I would say personally, this is just my thought. Looking at Carson Wentz, what's the receiver? Does he need what I would call a ball-dominant receiver, like a Julio Jones or, an A.J. Green in his prime, Calvin Johnson in his prime, Randy Moss in his prime? I don't know if he necessarily needs that. I don't know if an NFL team in today's league, I don't know if that team needs that, right? I don't know if you need that kind of player. But I will say that you want your quarterback to have receivers that are able to separate or a scheme that can get them open. So you need one of the two, and most times you need a little bit of both, right? And I think that's really what it comes down to is finding ways to be able to get those receivers open for them and guys that also can get open for themselves. And I think that's one of the big things that we'll see, especially with, no Alshon Jeffrey, no Nelson Aguilar, no Deshaun Jackson, having those 3 guys out of the lineup. Now you've got to rely on some of those other young guys to prove that they can do that here down the stretch. Can Greg Ward prove that he can do that? Zach Ertz, over the course of his career, Zach Ertz is not a top 5 athlete. He's not a top 10 athlete at the tight end position. He's just not. He's not the quickest. He's not the most sudden. He's not the most twitchy. He's not the most explosive. He, without a doubt, is one of the best pure separators of any tight end in football because he is an outstanding route runner. His ability to attack leverage and get himself open, find ways to separate. I know it doesn't always look pretty. He's not the most explosive guy, but he finds ways to get open, and Carson trusts that. He trusts that Zach Ertz is going to get open. So you'll see him throw with anticipation on those throws to Zach Ertz because Zach has shown consistently that he is that guy. And I think that's something you see. We saw that a couple of weeks ago. Alshon Jeffrey down in Miami, how many of those plays did Carson throw with anticipation where, Alshon Jeffrey, is he the fastest? Is he the quickest? No. But against that secondary and knowing what Alshon can do at the catch point, he trusted, this guy's going to go up. He's going to make a play for me. He's going to be able to make those plays on the other side. And I think ultimately when you're looking at trying to build with Carson, it's all about, you have to meet that halfway, right? You need guys that are able to separate, and you need the scheme to also be able to work for him and Carson to be able to trust that. So a lot of factors. I don't think it's necessary to have to say, we got to go get one of the top 2 receivers, a ball-dominant receiver. I don't know that that's really necessary. Of course, it's like you said, Wilt, though. every quarterback would love to have that guy, in his back pocket, and certainly in a wide receiver room. I just don't know that building that in today's NFL, if that's a totally necessary thing, going back to your question. So great question there from Right Him. Daniel, appreciate your question as well. Thank you to both, and thank you to all of you out there for listening to this podcast and all of our podcast offerings over at PhiladelphiaEagles.com. All right, let's get now to the next segment of the show. Let's get now to our scouting report.
Dim those lights. We're headed to the film room for the scouting report.
All right, so a little bit of a different spin this week on our scouting report, because I was looking up and down the Dallas Cowboys roster and trying to decide, all right, who's a player that we can break down? I've done Ezekiel Elliott in the past. Certainly, we play this team twice a year, so I've gone through a lot of those key players. We did Xavier Woods earlier this season. We've looked at DeMarcus Lawrence in the past, Jaylon Smith, Leighton Vander Esch, a lot of those big players. Amari Cooper last year when he was traded. So I thought, you know what? Let's look at Robert Quinn. Now, Robert Quinn came out in the 2011 draft, and I don't have a complete set of notes from him coming out, because that was, kind of my between years of coming from Temple over to the Eagles. So it was kind of in between of when I would be writing reports on guys. So I don't have full notes on Robert Quinn, but I do think when you look at him coming out and with the kind of player that he is, because I remember watching him in North Carolina, and he was a specimen there. He barely played his final year. He missed most of the season due to NCAA violations. I'm pretty sure he might have missed the entirety of his final season on campus. But this guy was a terror whenever he was on the field. Had a good career in St. Louis and then later in LA with the Rams, went to the Dolphins, had some production down there, and now is producing at Dallas. And I think when you watch Robert Quinn, he is a pure high side rusher, right? He is a guy that's going to win with speed and quickness and flexibility. He can turn the corner like a Ferrari and fire his way to the quarterback. He's got that bend that you talk about with pass rushers off the edge. The knock on him is that he's not a power leverage guy. Every once in a while, he'll work in speed to power. He's got the ability to do that, but he's not a guy that you would say he's a pure technician with his hands. That's not his strength. That's not one of the biggest positives in his game, but with his quickness, he's always able to win. So that gets me to thinking about how I view college pass rushers when they're making their transition to the NFL. If I were to watch Robert Quinn, let's say he was a pass rusher instead of playing for the Dallas Cowboys and racking up close to double-digit sacks. Let's say he was at LSU or he was at Oklahoma or Ohio State. I would look at him and I would say, just knowing myself, I would say, all right, this guy's got all the physical tools. He can run the hoop. He's got a top-level athlete, does not use his hands well, only wins high side, doesn't have the ability to win low side right now, needs to expand his repertoire of moves. But at the end of the day, Robert Quinn has been a long-time starter and an effective starter, and he still has those pitfalls in his game. So that leads me to kind of thinking about that position as a whole. And I've been thinking about this now really since studying Dallas early in the season up until this point. Obviously, is a home for those kind of players, right? We've seen guys like Vic Beasley. He's had certain levels of success. It doesn't look like he'll be back in Atlanta next year. His rookie contract is set to expire. He had double-digit sacks, I believe, his second year in the league, and since then has not been nearly as productive. So we'll see, how that bodes for him. But I think when you look at some of these high side rushers, we've seen guys like Bruce Irvin have flash in the pan years where, they have double digit sacks and then they kind of fall off and it's 3 or 4 sacks. Then it's back up to 8, then 12, then back to 3, 4, 5 sacks. The success kind of wanes, goes up and down throughout the course of their career. And I think ultimately when you look at those kinds of players, they can be very effective for you, and especially if you have a scheme like what Dallas does, where they put Robert Quinn and they don't. There are times where they just say, "Okay, pin your ears back and just go, win through the C gap, get upfield, turn the corner, beat the tackle across from you." But they are also very, very active with all of their stunts and their twists and their blitz packages. So they're not a heavy blitz team, but they'll run a lot of stunts and twists up front and add pressure to that side. Where Jordan Lewis, he had a sack this past week of Jared Goff, where Robert Quinn is looping inside and he takes the attention away from Jordan Lewis blitzing through the B gap because that guard is so worried about Robert Quinn. So I think when you look at these guys, and there are a bunch of them in this draft, that's really what has me thinking about, is that there are so many pass rushers in this upcoming NFL draft that have that ability to get upfield and turn the corner with that explosive first step and that rare flexibility, that that bend that you're looking for, but you wish you saw a little bit more with their hands and their ability to win in multiple ways. Robert Quinn is not that guy, but he's very effective in that scheme with Dallas because of what they ask him to do. So for me personally now, I have to look at this and say, okay, when I'm watching these college guys, don't just say, you know what, this guy can't start until he fixes this. Because honestly, that was one of the big knocks on Derek Barnett as well. And we've seen him over the course of the last 3 years really improve and start to work in more of those low side rushes. We've seen spin moves. We've seen some speed to power. We've seen some inside jab steps. So he's starting to mix those in as well. And he's obviously also a very strong run player. So he's got the ability to win at the point of attack and set the edge and things like that against tackles and tight ends. So you still need that component. I guess that's a part of it we have to take into account. You can't just be a one-trick pony, high-side pass rusher and not be a factor against the run, and that's one aspect certainly to include. But I just thought, talking about Robert Quinn, looking at the Dallas Cowboys, this was a little bit of a topic we could cover here on the show, talking about those high-side pass rushers and how they can find a role in the right scheme and be starters, be three-down players if they're used in that way. And Robert Quinn, I think, fits that boat. Very, very effective player for them in that system with Rod Marinelli and Chris Richard leading the way. All right, a ton of stuff that we covered here on this week's show. Thanks again to Greg Cosell and all of you out there listening. We will see you next week here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade.